Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you were there? Or maybe you've misplaced your keys and had no idea where you put them. For most of us, little moments like that are harmless, just part of everyday life. But what if they're not? Dementia doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't just switch on like a light. It creeps in, slowly, quietly, until one day, what seemed like a simple memory slip starts becoming something more. But here's the thing. Not every forgetful moment means dementia is setting in. Stress, lack of sleep, even what you eat can mimic its symptoms. And the last thing you want to do is panic over something that might not even be a real problem. That's why today we're going to talk about 6 early warning signs of dementia, things most people completely overlook. And more importantly, we're going to go over what you can actually do about them, because catching these signs early can make all the difference. And make sure you stick around until the end, because the last sign on this list might be the most surprising and the most dangerous if ignored. Dementia is one of those things that sneaks up on people. It doesn't come with a big, obvious warning sign. Instead, it starts with little things, moments that seem harmless at first. A forgotten appointment here, a misplaced item there. It's easy to brush off, to assume it's just normal aging, but for some people, those small changes are actually the first signs of something bigger. The real challenge is knowing the difference. When does simple forgetfulness cross the line into something more concerning? And more importantly, what can you do if you start noticing these changes in yourself or someone you love? I remember a time when an old friend of mine came to me, worried sick about his wife. He told me she kept forgetting things, struggling with words, mixing up details, repeating herself in conversations. He started keeping track, noticing every little mistake, pointing them out whenever they happened. "You forgot again." "No, that's not what you meant to say," over and over. And the more he corrected her, the worse it seemed to get. He was convinced she was slipping into dementia, but something about it didn't sit right with me. I told him to try something different. For 1 week, just let her be. No corrections, no pointing out mistakes, just let the conversation flow naturally. And you know what? A week later, he came back shaking his head, almost laughing at himself. She was sharper, more articulate, like a weight had been lifted. Turns out it wasn't dementia at all. It was stress. And more than that, it was the constant reminders that she was forgetting things, which only made her second-guess herself even more. Sometimes the fear of losing our memory does more damage than the memory loss itself. That's why understanding these early signs is so important. Just because someone shows 1 or 2 symptoms doesn't automatically mean they have dementia. It could be something else. Lack of sleep, blood sugar issues, even dehydration. But if these signs start happening regularly, if they start piling up, that's when it's time to take a closer look. So let's talk about the 6 early warning signs of dementia, the ones that often show up long before a diagnosis. And more importantly, let's talk about what you can do to slow it down or even prevent it before it becomes a bigger problem. One of the first signs that something might be wrong isn't just forgetfulness. It's struggling to stay organized and plan things the way you used to. Now, we all misplace things from time to time, but when everyday tasks start feeling confusing, when simple decisions take longer than they should, that's when you need to pay attention. I've seen it happen to people I've known for years. Someone who was always on top of things, paying bills on time, remembering appointments, managing household chores, suddenly starts missing payments, forgetting important dates, or feeling overwhelmed by tasks they used to handle with ease. Maybe they used to follow a recipe without a second thought, but now they find themselves reading it over and over, unsure of what to do next. This isn't just about memory. It's about the brain losing its ability to put things in order, to process steps in the right sequence. And the person experiencing it? They often know something feels off, but they don't always want to admit it. That's the hard part. When they start making excuses, covering up mistakes, brushing things off as just being tired or distracted. If this sounds familiar, the best thing you can do is keep an eye on the pattern. It's not about 1 or 2 mistakes here and there. We all have those. But if you start seeing these struggles happening more often, if they're becoming part of everyday life, that's when it might be time to step in. Because catching it early makes all the difference. Another sign that often goes unnoticed is a shift in personality. Now, I'm not talking about the natural changes that come with getting older. Everyone slows down a bit. Everyone has good days and bad days. I'm talking about real noticeable differences in how a person acts, reacts, and interacts with the world around them. I've seen it happen before. Someone who was always patient, easygoing, and full of life suddenly becomes irritable, anxious, or withdrawn. They snap over little things that never used to bother them. Maybe they start losing interest in conversations, zoning out when they used to be engaged. Or they become suspicious of people around them, convinced someone's stealing from them when nothing is missing. At first, you might chalk it up to stress or just a bad mood. But when these shifts become more frequent, when they don't quite seem like themselves anymore, it could be something more. That's because dementia doesn't just affect memory, it affects emotions too. The parts of the brain that regulate mood and behavior start to change, and a person might not even realize it's happening. What makes this sign so tricky is that it's easy to dismiss. It's easy to say, oh, they're just getting cranky in their old age, or they've been a little off lately, but they'll snap out of it. But if their personality seems different in a way that doesn't feel right, it's worth paying attention to. And here's the thing, getting frustrated with them won't help. I've seen families make that mistake. They argue, they try to reason, they push back when their loved one is acting irrational. But dementia doesn't respond to logic. It's not about winning an argument. It's about recognizing that something deeper might be going on and handling it with patience, not frustration. So if you notice a loved one acting differently, if they seem more irritable, distant, or suspicious in ways that don't quite make sense, don't ignore it. It could be one of the first signs that their brain is starting to change. Now here's one that surprises a lot of people, constipation. Yeah, you heard me right. Of all the things that could hint at dementia, you probably didn't expect bathroom struggles to make the list. But here we are. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Drop a 3 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more videos like this. All right, let's keep going. Most people don't realize that the gut and the brain are basically old friends who have been gossiping about you behind your back for years. Your digestive system isn't just there to process food. It actually produces neurotransmitters, the same chemicals your brain uses to think, remember, and function properly. In fact, your gut makes more serotonin, the feel-good chemical, than your brain does. So when your gut is out of whack, your brain often follows. I've seen it firsthand. People who suddenly start having more digestive issues, struggling with constipation, bloating, or just not feeling quite right, often don't connect the dots to their brain health. But here's where it gets interesting. Research shows that people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's have a much higher incidence of chronic constipation long before they're diagnosed. Turns out the same parts of the nervous system that control digestion are affected by cognitive decline. Now let's be clear, just because you haven't had a good bathroom experience in a few days doesn't mean your memory's about to pack its bags and leave. Sometimes it's just bad luck, or maybe you've been ignoring vegetables like they personally offended you. But if constipation becomes a regular problem and you start noticing other cognitive changes, it's worth paying attention. Because while we can all blame a rough morning on a bad burrito, long-term digestive issues could be your body whispering that something deeper is going on. The good news? Your gut is something you can take control of. A diet full of fiber, plenty of water, and foods that support gut health, like probiotics and fermented vegetables, can work wonders. And believe it or not, fasting has been shown to improve gut health and even help your brain clear out toxins. Basically, giving your gut a break is like sending it to a fancy spa, except you don't have to pay for overpriced cucumber water. So while constipation alone doesn't mean dementia is knocking at the door, it's one of those weird little warning signs that shouldn't be ignored. The brain and gut are more connected than most people realize, and keeping one healthy helps protect the other. And hey, if that means finally eating some fiber, well, your future self will thank you. Another sign that flies under the radar? Changes in your senses, smell, taste, hearing, even appetite. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm getting older. Of course things don't smell as strong, and my favorite foods don't hit the same way. That's true to a point. But when your senses start going dull too much, it could be your brain waving a little red flag. One of the earliest signs of dementia is a diminished sense of smell. In fact, there's research showing that people who struggle to detect certain scents, like peanut butter or coffee, are at a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's. And let's be honest, if peanut butter ever stops smelling good to you, something is definitely wrong. But it's not just smell. Taste can change too. Maybe foods start to seem bland, or you suddenly lose interest in meals you used to love. Some people even stop feeling hungry as often, and their appetite just slowly fades. And before you know it, they're barely eating, losing weight, and no one can figure out why. It's not that they don't want to eat, it's that their brain isn't sending the right signals anymore. Hearing and vision can also take a hit, and I'm not just talking about the usual turn up the TV or where did I put my glasses routine. Some people start having trouble recognizing faces, or they mishear words and get confused in conversations. And let me tell you, that can lead to some hilarious misunderstandings. Until you realize it's not just selective hearing, it's something more serious. The tricky part is that these sensory changes don't happen overnight. They creep in little by little until one day you realize something just feels off. Now here's the good news. This is one of the few signs that can actually be tested early. Doctors can check your sense of smell, track changes in your hearing, and even run cognitive tests to see if there's something deeper going on. And if you catch it soon enough, there's a lot you can do to slow it down. So if your morning coffee doesn't smell as rich, or your food doesn't taste quite right, don't just brush it off as bad seasoning. Pay attention, because sometimes the first signs of dementia aren't in your memory. They're in the little details you stop noticing. Another big one? Trouble with language. Now, we all have moments where we blank on a word. It's part of life. You walk into the kitchen, stand there like an idiot, and suddenly can't remember why you're there. Or you're in the middle of a conversation and say, hand me the thing. You know, the thing. That's normal. But when this starts happening a lot, when someone struggles to find words, repeats themselves constantly, or starts mixing up sentences in ways that don't make sense, that's when it's time to pay attention. I once knew a guy who started telling stories that sounded completely normal until you actually listened to what he was saying. He could put together full sentences, they had structure, they had rhythm, they just didn't make any sense. It was like talking to someone who just got back from the dentist and was still loopy on anesthesia. See, dementia affects the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for language and memory. When it starts to shrink, so does a person's ability to process words. It's not that they don't know what they're trying to say. It's like their brain is playing a cruel game of hide and seek with their vocabulary. They reach for a word and their brain just goes, nope, not today. And it's frustrating, not just for the person experiencing it, but for everyone around them. I've seen families get impatient, cutting their loved one off mid-sentence, finishing their thoughts for them, or correcting them every time they mix something up. But let me tell you, that doesn't help. If anything, it just makes them feel even more lost, like their own mind is betraying them. The best thing to do, slow down, let them take their time. If they mix up a word, don't jump in to fix it, just roll with it. Sometimes the frustration of trying to get things right is what makes it worse. So if you or someone you know start struggling more and more with speech, pay attention. If it's just the occasional brain fart, congratulations, you're human. But if it's happening constantly, if words start slipping away like they're being stolen in the middle of the night, it might be time to look deeper. Because when your brain starts ghosting you mid-sentence, that's not just getting older. That's a sign something bigger might be going on. Now, this next one might hit home for a lot of people. Getting lost in familiar places. And no, I'm not talking about the kind of loss where you walk into Costco and suddenly forget where you parked. That happens to the best of us. I mean real disorienting confusion, even in places you've been 100 times before. See, your brain has an internal GPS, a little built-in navigation system that helps you understand where you are in space. When that system starts to fail, things that should be second nature, like driving to a friend's house, finding your way around the grocery store, or even walking through your own neighborhood, start feeling unfamiliar. I knew a guy who always prided himself on never needing a map. He could drive anywhere without directions, never got turned around, never second-guessed himself. Then one day, he was coming back from his usual coffee shop, a place he'd been going to for years, and suddenly nothing looked right. He didn't recognize the streets, didn't know which turn to take. He had to pull over and sit there for a minute, trying to make sense of it. That was the moment he realized something wasn't right. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe he was just tired, maybe distracted. But then it started happening more often. He'd go to the store and forget which way to exit. He'd walk around his own house and hesitate, confused about which door led where. It wasn't just forgetfulness, it was like his brain had misplaced its own map. That's one of the scarier signs of dementia, because it's not just about memory, it's about orientation. The hippocampus, the same part of the brain that helps with memory and language, also controls spatial awareness. When it starts to shrink, that built-in GPS starts glitching. Now, this doesn't mean every time you miss a turn, you should start panicking. But if you or someone you know starts having real trouble navigating familiar places, that's a red flag. If they suddenly hesitate in their own neighborhood, if they keep getting lost in places they've been going to for years, that's something to take seriously. The best thing to do? Pay attention to patterns. One wrong turn is nothing. Getting lost in a place you should know? That's worth keeping an eye on. Because once your brain starts misplacing landmarks, it's time to make sure it's not losing anything else too. So now that we've covered the 6 early signs of dementia, let's talk about what all of this actually means, and more importantly, what you can do about it. The first thing to remember is that just because you or someone you know has experienced one of these signs doesn't automatically mean dementia is setting in. We all forget things, we all have off days. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's bad sleep, sometimes it's just getting older. But when these signs start stacking up, when they become part of everyday life instead of just an occasional slip, that's when it's time to pay attention. Now here's the good news. Cognitive decline isn't always a one-way street. The brain is more adaptable than people think, and there's a lot you can do to slow things down or even reverse some of the damage if you catch it early enough. It all comes down to taking care of your brain the way you take care of the rest of your body. That means eating foods that fuel your brain instead of inflaming it, getting enough sleep, because your brain actually cleans itself out while you're sleeping. Moving your body because circulation is key to keeping your brain healthy. And staying socially and mentally active, because a bored brain is a shrinking brain. Too often people assume that dementia is just part of aging, that once it starts, there's nothing you can do. But that's not true. The choices you make today, what you eat, how you live, how much you challenge your brain, can have a huge impact on how sharp you stay in the years ahead. And that's why I want to hear from you. Have you noticed any of these signs in yourself or someone close to you? What changes have you made to keep your brain sharp as you age? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your story might just help someone else going through the same thing. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We've got a lot more to talk about when it comes to keeping your mind and body strong as you get older. And if you want to learn more about simple things you can do to protect your brain, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.